Guys, this video is a guide on the 5.2 banners, where I will tell you which of the featured 5 stars is best to pull for you based on how good they are and how your specific account is. So, first phase has Chasca and Lyney, both characters with serious caveats. Starting from Chasca, as I told you a few days ago, for this video I prepared some new style infographics with new parameters basically. In short, what I tried to do is I tried to rate characters based on multiple investment levels and multiple account situations to cover as many bases as possible, basically. For each investment level, I rated characters based on how they compare to other characters in the meta at the same investment level. So, for example, Chasca Constellation 2 Refinement 1, how she compares to other Constellation 2 Refinement 1 characters. And also, I ranked how other characters in the game synergize with the character I'm talking about specifically, just so I give you an idea of how that character can fit on your specific account. Let me tell you about this awesome anime gacha game called Ash Echoes that is sponsoring today's video. It's a one-of-a-kind real-time tactics game where you have a team of heroes you have to place in a stage to counter a horde of enemies that will be coming your way. The structure is of a tower defense grid-based type, and so strategy will always be the key in order for you to clear the stages. The combat's defining trait is elemental reaction, in that you can affect a stage's constitution through elemental attacks, and then trigger reactions by hitting those areas with other elemental attacks. The aesthetic of the game is clear anime-based inspirations, but what I noticed is that the developing team tried to give characters a clean and sober appearance without following typical anime features in an exaggerated way. This is a big selling point for me specifically because it gives the game more of a mature look, in my opinion. Again, the game is currently out already, both on mobile stores and on PC, so make sure to give it a chance, also considering you'll be able to get up to 200 pulls by starting out that will hopefully make you get the characters you desire. So, for Chasca, since she's a main DPS, the categories I picked is whether or not you have two main teams on your account. By two main teams, I mean if you already have two teams that can consistently clear the abyss already. This makes sense to me because, let's be honest, if you already have Arlecchino or Neuvillette on your account, you probably won't need yet another main DPS. Still, things would be different if Chasca was strong enough that she could compete with or surpass these characters, but for the most part that's not the case. She's a single target oriented character, and her damage output is just decent at free-to-play investment and only becomes somewhat competitive at higher investment, so a Constellation 2 with a signature. For the Constellation specifically, not only there are very significant damage increases, but they also alleviate the restrictions per kit and make her team building more flexible. Specifically, a Constellation 0, Chasca needs 3 teammates with 3 different elements out of Pyro, Cryo, Hydro, and Electro to maximize their damage out. Constellation 1 and 2 bring that requirement down to 2, and so that means that you can fill the 4th slot on your team with any character you want while still maximizing Chasca's damage output. On the flip side, I like her much more for players that don't have an established account. The reason is that she's a multi-element DPS, whose elemental damage will be the same type as the element of the other characters in the team, granted they're Pyro, Hydro, Cryo, and Electro. This makes her very good at dealing with any kind of elemental shields and also enemies that have very specific elemental resistances. So, she's kind of an all-in-one DPS, and this is pretty great for players that don't have that good of an account yet, I guess. As for her teammates ranking, she can technically fit with a lot of different characters because she can just take their element to deal damage on their own through that element, but obviously she does have preferences. Furina and Bennett are her best teammates because they are her best buffers, since the buffs they provide are rather universal, with Furina and damage bonus and Bennett and attack percent. They're just buffs that will increase the entirety of her damage output. I remind you that Chasca deals damage to different elements, so a character like Shenhe won't be able to buffer as much as a character like Furina does, because Shenhe only mostly buffs cryo damage. Also, Furina is a nice sub-DPS and Bennett is a healer, so they both cover multiple roles on their teams. Shenhe is still nice because she will buff her cryo damage by a lot, and with that cryo damage she will be able to proc melt reaction sometimes, so that's pretty significant still. Odoron is great thanks to the fact that he can hold the scroll set and buff some of her elemental damage that way, and he can also deal some decent damage, but it's mostly because he can hold the scroll set as a Nathan character. So, for example, a pretty great team concept will be both Furina and Bennett and one on Shenhe and Odoron. Then there are characters like Kazuha and Shilonen that both provide quite significant buffs for Chasca Constellation 0, but since they are respectively Anemo for Kazuha and Geo for Shilonen, they won't flourish until Chasca Constellation 1 and Constellation 2, at which point they become pretty amazing, and you can just add them to teams pretty seamlessly, with Shilonen provide a lot of healing on top of buffing, and Kazuha being a nice Anemo battery for her. Then there are a lot of suboptimal picks that are still nice, like Fischl that is pretty much worse Aurora in this case, Xiangling that is nice despite her being the same element as Bennett, but still since she deals quite some damage and she provides some buffs from pyro damage, she is decent. Charlotte as a cryo healer that functions very well with Furina. Layla with her shield that is still nice, even though Chasca has some interruption resistance, which however is not full, so a shield is still nice. Rosaria as a Shen alternative, and Ganyu the same, another Shen alternative. Then we have Mona that is basically worse Furina, Kachina that is basically worse Shilonen, Sigewinne that as a team-wide healer can fit well with Furina technically, but since they are the same element that would not be that great for Chasca Constellation 0, but becomes good if she's Constellation 1 or 2. Lisa provides defense reduction effects, which increase the entirety of Chasca's damage, and so she's pretty okay. Mika, a cryo team-wide healer, I kinda just like him less than Charlotte in that sense, so I'm putting him here, but he's still pretty okay. Jin and Xianyun, both Anemo team-wide healers, same element as Chasca, so unless she's Constellation 1 or 2, they will be nerfed compared to other team-wide healing options. Dea for interruption resistance, Zhongli for the same, Farazan if you really want to play Anemo Hyper Chasca, so without having other elements on the team, which is just not suggested, but I guess it's an option, so I'm putting her here. Now let's switch to Lyney. For Lyney I picked different categories compared to Chasca, despite him also being a main DPS, and that's because him having a risky playstyle takes precedence to me over whether or not you have two main teams on your account in terms of whether or not you want to pull for him. Specifically, he's a bow charge attack damage dealer that has no interruption resistance, and that makes him very vulnerable to getting staggered. That feels very bad to me a free-to-play investment, so a situation where his damage output is not the highest, and so that means that he will need more time on average to clear the abyss, and that means a bigger window where he can potentially get staggered and fuck something up. This aspect becomes better at higher investment, specifically signature weapon that is very strong, his constellations not so much, his early ones, but his signature weapon is very strong, and at that point it deals enough damage that he can clear rooms fast, and so that's a smaller window where he can be vulnerable in. And taking aside his vulnerability flaws, he's a DPS that can deal a lot of damage, and in the best case scenario can even compete with the top tier DPS in his element like Arlecchino for example. As for your teammates, the only staple here is Bennett, because it kind of just increases his damage by 50%, which is pretty massive, and also heals him, so it covers multiple roles. Then there is Xiangling, that is a pretty amazing partner for him, because she's a very good AoE sub DPS that can also support him in some ways. Furina for the Vape Lyney teams, which might seem counterintuitive because Lyney does have a passive that makes his damage much higher if the opponent is pyro applied on him, and also the more pyro teammates he has on team, but Vape is a strong enough reaction that it can make up for all of that, especially with Furina on team since she provides big damage bonuses. Then Zhongli as a pretty universal defensive option, a shielder that for Lyney can be a godsend, but kind of just limits his damage because he's a lesser offensive option compared to alternatives like Kazuha, Shilonen, so yeah, Zhongli is just for safety. Dea isn't great, so lower than Zhongli, because she kind of just does the same thing, so she provides interruption resistance and some defensive utility, but she's a bit worse at everything. And here we also have Emily, so for the burning monopyro variant, where Emily can deal quite some damage, but honestly, she's just kind of an alternative compared to like Xiangling. Reviews for the Overload Lyney teams that are pretty nice, but can be hit or miss in terms of application, because the electro application from characters like Fischl can kind of disrupt the pyro application on opponents, especially if you're facing multiple of them, in which case it just becomes less consistent. Then there are just alternatives all around, like Yanfei as a shielding alternative to Zhongli and Deya, Lynette as an alternative to Kazuha, Sucrose same, Baiju as a healer shielder that can provide burning and keep the pyro application up, Kachina as a shielding alternative, Jean as an additional healer that can also reduce resistance like Kazuha can, Xianyun the same, Yae kind of just a official alternative for the Chevreuse Overload teams, and Kirara as a shielder for burning monopyro teams. Now, talking about the second phase, we have Zhongli and Neuvillette here, so quite strong characters. Starting from Zhongli, I personally believe that his value kind of fluctuates depending on whether or not you have Shilonen on your account. And that's just because Shilonen does the same things, the same offensively, but just better across the board for most characters in the game. So, damage bonuses and resistance reduction. Still, Zhongli has an argument offensively, because while Shilonen heals the active character, Zhongli provides shields, which protect you from staggering and also taking damage entirely, so they're just better than healing in terms of defensive utility shields generally. It's also just more flexible, because while Shilonen needs to have some Pyro, Cryo, Hydro, Electro characters on team, Zhongli doesn't have that requirement, and so it just kinda fits better on some Anemo teams, Geo teams, Dendro teams, and stuff like that. As for his possible teammates, I just ranked characters depending on whether or not I think they need a shield, because it's just never really the best offensive option for them, and so his value on a team really just depends on whether or not the character needs a shield. So characters like Ganyu, Yoimiya, Wander, Lyney, that really suffer without a shield, Zhongli is goated for them. Then we have characters like Xiao, Ayato, Yae, Alhaitham, Neuvillette, Arlecchino, so characters that have partial or no interruption resistance, but still can technically do without a shield because they're not as vulnerable as these characters are. Zhongli is good for these characters, but not really needed by any shape or form. Then characters that don't really need him, so for example Noelle that has a shield of her own, so of course she doesn't need Zhongli. On top of that, Wu Tao that has pretty good interruption resistance and also has charge attacks that make her move quite uniquely, so she's hard to hit in general. Then Chasca, Kenich, Molani, Natran characters with very high interruption resistance. Grizzly, I guess, can go here because he has interruption resistance, but it's not infallible, it's not impeccable, so he likes a shield, I guess. And then we have Ito, Eula, Kokomi, Raiden that actually have full interruption resistance, and so they don't really need them. Then characters that don't really have space on their team for Zhongli to fit in them. So for example, Child and his national teams that need Bennett, Shenling and animal characters to be viable in the meta. Then Nilo and their Boom teams that of course don't allow characters other than Hydro and Dendro. And then there are the punch teams like Deluxe and Gaming, where you need Bennett, a Hydro character to vape, and Xianyun for a character like Deluxe to punch in the first place, and for Gaming to deal a lot of damage. Lastly, Neuvillette. Honestly, I don't really think I need to talk about him, because he's so clearly so strong. He's a really good pull. I don't need to tell you this, you already know, but I guess here we go. He gets maximum scores at all investment levels regardless of the scenario, because to me he's just the best DPS in the game, thanks to how easy he is to use, how good he is in AoE scenarios that is not really common, and also thanks to his high damage ceiling, of course, at all investment levels, so free to play with options like Prototype Ember, a Dolphin investment level with his signature, and with his constellations too that are really good. For his team situation, I made an exception compared to other DPS on this video, because he's just so good that I don't want to name staples. Like, he of course has some best teammates in Fiorina, Kazuha, Shilonen, but I wouldn't call them staples, because Neuvillette is so strong that he doesn't need these characters to be great. So, even alternatives that just buff his damage in some ways, like Child through the normal attack talent level increase, Kachina with his scroll set, Baiju by being a healer, Jin by being a healer, Lisa through defense reduction effects, Auron with the scroll set, is really good, even in the Shenling Vape teams, for example. Honestly, I would put Nahida on great as well, because she can be used as a rather great elemental mastery buffer for the vape teams and also for all kinds of bloom teams. Emily, just kind of a worse alternative to me for vape teams personally. Yae is a sub DPS for general teams, Fischl same. Raiden and Cookie for hype bloom teams, Lyra for shielding, which is always good, Dia for interruption resistance still, and we have Sucrose as a casual alternative. And with this, I'm done for today. Remember to give Ash Echoes a try through the link in the description below, and also if you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe and go check the Chasca guide I made a week ago. Bye bye.